Section 1. A lake too quiet. Stillwater Lake wasn't marked on most maps. Tucked into Minnesota's cold northwoods, it rested beneath a canopy of pine and whispering birch. It wasn't the kind of place people moved to. It was the kind of place people retreated to when they wanted to forget or be forgotten. In the summer of 1957, 3 strangers came to Stillwater within the span of 6 weeks. The first was a wiry man in his 50s named Emmett Kerr. He arrived by Greyhound, carrying a leather suitcase and a sour expression. He rented cabin 3 at Miller's Landing, paid 6 weeks up front, and told the clerk he was writing a novel. No one ever saw him write. Next came Margaret DeWitt. Young, red-haired, always in a long brown coat no matter the weather. She kept to herself but spoke with a voice that carried. Cabin 7. She told the gas station owner she was getting over something. When asked what, she smiled and said, "Myself." The third was nameless to most. A traveling salesman, maybe, judging by his hard leather shoes and quick smile. He claimed Cabin 5 stayed a week and was seen often at the diner, always reading old newspapers from out of town. And then they were gone. No goodbyes. No packed bags. Their cabins, when checked, looked lived in but oddly paused, coffee cups half full, chairs angled as though someone had just stepped away. Sheriff Carl Renner found it peculiar, but nothing seemed illegal. People left towns all the time. But 3 in 6 weeks? Stillwater didn't speak of it much, but it remembered. Section 2, Carl's list. Sheriff Carl Renner was a man who believed in writing things down. The brain forgets, he'd mutter, but ink doesn't. He kept a thick brown ledger on his desk, and in it were names and notes, some official, some less so. By late autumn, Renner had added 3 new entries. Kerr, Emmett, last seen September 8th, walked the dock alone. DeWitt, Margaret, picked up groceries, then vanished. Unknown mail. Short stay, no ID on file, diner patron. He reread the entries daily, tapping a pencil against the margin. It wasn't just their disappearances that troubled him. It was the feel of it all, like a pattern was forming just beneath the surface, one he couldn't quite touch. He questioned the locals. While from the bait shop swore he saw Emmett rowing late one night. Clara at the diner recalled Margaret asking odd questions about the lake's depth. And the waitress mentioned the salesman read nothing but obituaries. All peculiar, but not criminal. Carl walked the lakeshore often, sometimes at night, listening. The lake never spoke back. One day in November, Carl received a letter. No return address. Inside was a yellowed photograph, faded and water-damaged. It showed 3 people, none clearly visible, standing on the same dock near Cabin 5. Scribbled on the back, "You're looking the wrong way." Section 3, a stranger at Miller's Landing. By the time spring arrived, the disappearances had faded into whispered legend until the day a woman named Judith Cray arrived at Miller's Landing. She wore city clothes, heels unsuited for gravel roads, and she asked directly for Cabin 3. "I heard the view is good there," she said. The clerk, an older man named Walter Miller, blinked. "That cabin's been empty since." "Well, for a while." "I'll take it," Judith replied. She stayed only at night. By day, she walked. Always near the lake, sometimes out to the small dock where Emmett had last been seen. She never asked questions, but people noticed her eyes, constantly scanning the water, as if expecting something to rise. Sheriff Renner paid her a visit. "You a relative of Emmett Kerr?" "No," she said. "But I read about him. About the others, too." Carl stiffened. There was no article. No official story. Judith just smiled. "Then maybe I read something that wasn't meant for me." She wasn't scared. That bothered Carl more than if she had been. Section 4. The ledger grows. Carl's ledger grew slowly. New names joined the list. Judith Cray, Markson, Joseph, a local who swore he saw a second doc appear briefly in the fog, and Dr. Elaine Brody, a psychologist from Duluth who came to speak with Judith and never returned home. Every case was different, but similar in tone. Sudden, silent, unresolved. Carl started to keep a second ledger, this one hidden in a drawer. In it, he noted oddities, weather patterns, strange lights reported over the lake, dreams locals claimed they shared. He didn't believe in ghosts or UFOs, but he believed in patterns. And Stillwater was developing one. The lake was always still, but now it felt watchful. Section 5. Letters never sent. In the back of Judith's cabin, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, Carl found a stack of letters. And signed. Unsent. They all began the same way. "If you're reading this, I didn't leave. I was taken." Each letter described sleepless nights, the The sensation of being watched from under the water and dreams of a cabin that didn't exist, but smelled of cedar and lake water. The handwriting was Judith's, though each letter bore subtle differences. Some slanted left, some printed in block, almost as if written by different people trying to mimic the same hand. Carl took the letters home. That night, he dreamed of the lake. In his dream, a wooden staircase led down beneath the water, and someone was knocking on the door at the bottom. Section 6. The dock that wasn't. In early June, a boy named Travis Weller claimed to have seen a second dock on the east side of the lake, one that disappeared when he brought his father to see it. It was there, he insisted, with a boat tied up, but no one in it. His father, skeptical, brushed it off as imagination, but Carl made a note in the ledger. Temporary structures? Mirage? Carl walked the eastern bank for 3 days. On the third, he found a worn rope half buried in the sand, knotted as if it had once tied off a boat. No dock, no pilings, just the faint smell of something damp and old. That night, Carl visited the town's only librarian, Miss Agnes Wren, and asked about old maps of the lake. She retrieved a box of hand-drawn topographic maps from the 1920s. One showed a finger of land that no longer existed, erased, perhaps, by erosion or rising waters. But what caught Carl's eye was a tiny X on the tip of the vanished landmass. Scribbled beside it in faded pencil, Thorn House. Who was Thorn? Carl asked. Agnes frowned. Reclusive family. Left before the war. No one remembers much, except they built their house too close to the water. Section 7. The Thorn Legacy. The Thorns had left Stillwater nearly 30 years before, but their names still lingered in forgotten property deeds and dusty library shelves. Carl tracked down a brittle file in the courthouse archives. Handwritten notes, a property map, and one weathered photograph of a large cedar house standing by the water. But the house was gone. Not collapsed. Not condemned. Just gone. No record of demolition. No sale. No fire. Carl visited the spot the next day. The land was forested now. Nothing but trees and old stones half sunk into moss. But when he walked it, he felt, watched. He kept his hand on his holster the whole time, though no one was there. That evening, he placed a call to the State Historical Society. Do you have any records on the Thorn family? He asked. A pause. Why are you asking? The voice replied. Carl hesitated. Curiosity. Another pause. You're not the first. Before Carl could ask what that meant, the line went dead. Section 8. Judith's final walk. Judith Cray was last seen on a foggy Thursday morning, walking the lake path with a yellow notebook under her arm. She waved to Walter Miller at the bait shop, smiled faintly, and said, I think I'm close. She never came back. Carl found her notebook 3 days later on the Thorn land, pages damp but legible. The entries were more chaotic than before, part observations, part fragmented dreams. One phrase repeated throughout. The lake listens. The lake remembers. The final page bore only a drawing, an eye carved into a tree trunk, with ripples radiating outward. Carl stared at it for a long time before closing the book. Whatever Judith had found, it hadn't let her go. He logged her as missing, but in his second ledger, he wrote a single word beneath her name. Taken. Section 9. The Diver. That summer, Carl brought in an old friend from his military days, Jack Monroe, now a private diver who did contract work for state agencies. Carl explained only that there had been oddities in the lake, and that he needed someone to take a look. Jack laughed. You always were a strange one, Carl. All right, I'll bite. He dove twice without finding anything, save for fishing lures and bottles. On the third dive, he found something more. Stone foundations buried in silt, far deeper than any known structure should have been. And something else, wooden steps, intact, descending into blackness. He didn't go down them. When he surfaced, he looked pale. There's something built down there, he said. Old, and it's not on any of your maps. That night, Jack left town. He never returned Carl's calls. Section 10. The map in the attic. Agnes Wren, the librarian, brought Carl a surprise, a hand-drawn map found in the attic of the old schoolhouse during renovation. It showed the lake not as it was, but as it had once been. Bigger, deeper, and marked in cryptic annotations. At the center of the lake, where the water was deepest, someone had drawn a house. Not a boat, not an island. A full house, labeled Thorn Residence. Beneath it, a tunnel extended toward shore, ending at what would now be the eastern inlet. Carl felt a chill. Agnes handed him a torn slip of paper tucked between the map's folds. It bore a date, August 3rd, 1929, and 3 words. We moved below. Carl didn't sleep that night. Section 11, the tunnel. Carl stared at the map for hours. The idea of a tunnel beneath the lake, one built nearly a century ago, seemed absurd. And yet, Jack had found stairs. Could there be truth to it? He returned to the thorn land with a shovel and flashlight. The earth was soft with recent rain, and near the base of a stone marker, he struck wood. Not a coffin. A hatch. It was sealed with rusted hinges and coated in layers of moss. Carl hesitated before opening it, listening for sounds, water, perhaps, or voices. There was nothing. Just stillness. He pried it open. A wooden ladder descended into darkness. The air that drifted up smelled of cedar, damp stone, and time. Carl didn't go down. Not yet. But he left a marker behind, an old brass coin tied to a string at the hatch edge, fluttering in the breeze. When he returned the next morning, the coin was gone. Section 12, the archivist. Carl drove to Duluth, hoping to speak with someone at the state archives who might explain more about the Thorne family. At the historical building's front desk, he asked for family files and was directed to a man named Gerald Finch. Finch was quiet, pale, with yellowing spectacles and ink-stained hands. "You're the sheriff from Stillwater," he said before Carl introduced himself. Carl nodded. "I'm looking into the Thorns." Finch stared at him a moment, then said, "Most people who look into the Thorns stop eventually." Carl said nothing. Finch retrieved a manila folder with trembling fingers. Inside were blueprints, family letters, and an architectural sketch labeled Sublacustran Structure Proposal, 1927. Carl's eyes widened. "They build under the lake?" Finch whispered, "They tried to live there." Section 13, Reflections. Back at Stillwater, Carl began noticing things. His reflection, for one, didn't always behave. Once, washing his hands, he saw his mirrored self linger a moment longer than he should have. Another time, he caught a glimpse of someone else entirely, Margaret DeWitt, staring back at him from the lake's surface. Dreams followed. He wandered hallways of dripping cedar, heard footsteps behind him, whispers through vents. He always awoke before reaching a locked wooden door. He took to sleeping in his office, ledger open beside him, a glass of whiskey never far. Each morning he'd add a line. The lake dreams too. No one believed him. But then, no one had gone as far as he had. Section 14, The Lantern Keeper. Walter Miller, longtime owner of Miller's Landing, pulled Carl aside one night. "You're not the first sheriff to chase ghosts," he said. "My uncle was sheriff before you. Died in 42. Drowned. In his own bathtub." Carl raised an eyebrow. Walter nodded grimly. He left a journal. Said something lived beneath the lake. Something that needed stories to grow. Carl pressed him. Walter relented. They climbed into a boat and rowed to the lake's center, where Walter dropped a rusted lantern overboard, tied to a long cord. It vanished into black. "Sometimes," Walter said, "they send light back up." That night, the lantern glowed. Section 15. Beneath the hatch. Carl descended the hatch. Each rung groaned beneath his weight. The air grew colder, wetter. At the bottom, he found a narrow tunnel, walls lined with old wood and iron rivets. Moss clung to corners. It stretched far under the earth, farther than he expected. He walked until he reached a chamber. Empty, save for a single rocking chair and a water-stained photograph nailed to the wall. A family of 4. A man, woman, and 2 children. All wore heavy coats. All stared blankly. A note beneath it read, "We chose quiet." Carl backed out slowly. As he climbed the ladder, he thought he heard the chair begin to rock. Section 16. The Lake's Voice. After the hatch experience, Carl found it hard to focus on daily duties. He'd sit in his office, staring at the lake through the window, half waiting for it to speak. Not out loud, but with signs, with shifts. It came one night as wind. He heard his name on the breeze, not like a voice, but like a thought carried in air. He followed it to the shore, alone, flashlight in hand. The lake was smooth as glass. But as he stood there, the beam caught something strange, ripples, forming in a perfect circle. And then, a voice. Soft, feminine, from nowhere and everywhere. "Do you remember?" Carl froze. The voice again. "You promised." He didn't sleep that night, nor the next. Instead, he wrote. Pages upon pages in his second ledger, memories, dreams, the phrase "you promised" scrawled in increasingly erratic script. Section 17. Return of the Diver. 3 weeks later, Jack Monroe returned, unannounced. He looked different, thinner, eyes sunken, hair damp as if he'd just stepped out of water. "I had to come back," he said, voice hollow. Carl made coffee. Jack wouldn't sit. "I dove again," Jack said. "Somewhere else. Thought maybe I imagined it the first time. But it's there. The house. Below. It's growing." Carl raised an eyebrow. "Growing?" Jack nodded. "It wasn't finished before. Now it's furnished. Lit. There are rooms that weren't there before. Did you go inside?" Jack shook his head. "They won't let me. But they speak." He reached into his coat and handed Carl a photograph. It showed the lake from above, but in the water, barely visible, was the outline of a house, larger than before. Jack left again that night. Carl never saw him after. Section 18, Agnes's Discovery. Agnes Wren had always been curious, but now her interest became obsession. She combed every historical document, local paper, and private letter she could find. One name kept appearing, Thomas Thorne. He was an engineer, fascinated by acoustics and submersion. Built the original Thorne house with deep insulation and watertight barriers. But Agnes found something stranger, a patent application for a resonant chamber designed to collect memory, filed in 1926. Why would someone try to collect memory? Carl asked. Agnes didn't answer. She just turned over a final note, written in Thomas's hand. "Memory is the last part of us to die. I will keep mine safe. I will build a home for it. The water is listening." Section 19. Margaret's Return. One foggy morning, nearly 2 years after she vanished, Margaret DeWitt returned. She walked into the diner like she had never left, same brown coat, same calm gaze. She ordered coffee. Clara, the waitress, dropped the pot in shock. Carl was called immediately. Margaret looked older, by decades. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes heavy. "Where have you been?" Carl asked. "Below," she whispered. "They needed my memories." She couldn't explain much. Time didn't move the same down there. The people in the house, they weren't dead. They were held, preserved in silence. "They don't mean harm," she said, "but they don't forget. Ever." Carl recorded every word. But Margaret vanished again that night. Her coat was found folded on the lake dock. No footprints in the snow. Section 20, the door at the bottom. Carl returned to the hatch. This time, he brought rope, lanterns, and a recorder. He descended deeper, past the first chamber, down a winding slope that felt less like tunnel and more like hallway. The air grew warm. Humming echoed through the wood, low, tonal, like a choir underwater. He reached a door. Heavy. Cedar and iron, carved with symbols that felt older than the town itself. He knocked. 3 times. It opened. Inside was light, soft, golden, impossible. He stepped in. The door closed behind him. Carl Renner wasn't seen again for 2 days. When he emerged, he was soaked to the bone, silent, and carrying a single item, Judith Cray's yellow notebook. But all the pages were blank. Section 21, the blank notebook. Carl placed Judith's notebook on his desk and stared at it for hours. Every page was untouched. No writing, no drawings, not even impressions left from a pen. But he could remember her words, vividly. The lake listens. The lake remembers. He flipped to the back cover. There, faintly etched into the cardboard, was a symbol he'd seen once before on the door beneath the lake. A spiral, surrounded by wave-like lines. He traced it with his finger. The room grew colder. That night, Carl dreamed of Judith again. She sat in the cedar chair, notebook in her lap, whispering, "It's not blank. You just can't see it from here." He woke with a gasp, clutching the ledger. In the dark, he turned on his desk lamp, and the pages of Judith's notebook began to bleed with ink. One line appeared first, the house is remembering itself. Section 22, the historian's letter. Agnes Wren received a letter postmarked from Maine. It bore no return address, only a wax seal with the spiral symbol. Inside was a single sheet of paper written in delicate cursive. To the one who keeps record. They will return when the house is whole. Each memory is a beam, a nail, a stair. Silence is not absence, it is foundation. Agnes took the letter to Carl. It's like someone is building the house from what's forgotten. Carl nodded grimly. And we've been supplying the materials. Together, they theorized that the disappearances, the echoes, the voices, they weren't random. Each person taken was a memory harvested. Each return, like Margaret's, was a temporary leak in the structure. They weren't just dealing with a haunting. They were dealing with a construction. Section 26, Agnes Alone. With Carl gone, Agnes Wren became the de facto guardian of Stillwater's secrets. She carried both ledgers now, his and her own, reviewing them nightly by the glow of an oil lamp. In the quiet, she could still hear Carl's voice, calm and gravelly, reading his notes aloud. She began compiling the symbols from the tunnel, matching them with references from old religious texts, Norse runes, even indigenous carvings from the region. One symbol kept recurring, a spiral breaking into waves. She found it once more, burned into her front porch. No one else in town noticed it. That night, a voice whispered from beneath her floorboards. "Write it down, Agnes. We forget when you don't." Section 27. The Memory Storm. The weather changed first. Stillwater, usually calm in summer, faced 3 storms in 2 weeks. Rain came without clouds. Thunder rumbled without lightning. The lake overflowed, lapping at the steps of the bait shop. With each storm came memories. People in town began to recall things that never happened, birthdays they never celebrated, friends who never existed. Clara at the diner swore she had a brother named James. She never did. The town doctor began treating phantom injuries. Agnes watched it all, recording everything in her ledger. She finally wrote, "The house isn't just remembering, it's projecting." And the more people remembered, the stronger the lake seemed to become. Section 28. The Second Hatch. On a fogged-over Thursday morning, Walter Miller found something along the western shoreline, another hatch. Smaller, cruder, but unmistakably like the first. Agnes came to inspect it. It was open. She didn't descend, but she recorded what she could see, claw marks along the wood, symbols scratched into stone, and a small, child-sized shoe left at the top step, soaked through but upright. Inside the hatch was a whisper. Not all memories were meant to return. Agnes backed away. She locked the hatch with a heavy chain and threw the key into the lake. It sank faster than it should have. Section 29. Carl's voice. 3 months after Carl vanished, the town held a memorial. Only a few came. That night, Agnes sat in her library, ledger open, recorder running, documenting the service. When she played the tape back later, there was something beneath her voice, breathing. Then, words. "Agnes." "It's Carl." She listened in shock as his voice came through, faint but certain. "The house is bigger now. It's not just rooms. It's corridors. Memories stacked in walls. People stored like paintings. It's not evil, but it is full. And it's still building." She pressed rewind. But on second play, the voice was gone. Only the sound of lapping water remained. Section 30. The Spiral Letter. Agnes received one final letter. No stamp. No address. Just a single sheet of parchment, folded 4 times. The spiral symbol marked its center. Inside, a message. "The last memory is yours." Agnes felt the house's pull more clearly than ever. In dreams, she walked its halls. In waking, she heard the hush of its rooms behind her. That night, she wrote her last entry. "If I follow, it will be by choice. And if I return, it will be for recording." She left the letter on her desk, took both ledgers under her arm, and walked out into the fog. The lake rippled once and swallowed the sound. Section 31. The Ledger's Return. A month after Agnes disappeared, her house was found unlocked. Inside, everything was untouched, save for 2 items placed carefully on the dining room table, Carl's ledger and hers. Both were dry despite the week's rain, pages open to the last entries. Carl's read, "It is not a place. It is a vessel." Agnes's, "I see now. The lake was never meant to hold water. It was meant to hold memory." Walter Miller locked the house and left it undisturbed. But sometimes, when the wind shifted, neighbors swore they heard pages turning from inside. And once, in the dark, someone saw a light coming from beneath the floorboards. Section 32. The Children's Game. That fall, a group of children playing by the western woods began a new game they claimed to have learned from the water. They called it Housekeeper. One child would hum softly while others whispered memories into a bucket of lake water. Names, places, birthdays, old pets. The hummer would then recite them back, word for word, even ones they couldn't have known. Parents grew uneasy. One mother emptied the bucket, only to find it filled again the next morning. The sheriff warned against letting the kids near the shore. But by then, they'd started building a small wooden house out of driftwood and nails. The walls weren't square, but they were familiar. Section 33. Clara's Confession. Clara from the diner came forward one winter evening. "I remember them all," she said. "Everyone who left. I dream of what they dreamed." She claimed the lake had chosen her, made her its mouthpiece. She spoke in riddles, describing rooms Carl had never written about, doors that opened into years instead of places. "I serve coffee to a man who hasn't been born yet," she whispered. Clara was taken to the hospital for observation. That night, she vanished from her locked room. On the window was written in condensation, "The house needed a kitchen," and in the diner, the next morning, the coffee brewed itself. Section 34, The Housekeeper. Stories spread through Stillwater of a figure walking along the lake at dusk. A tall silhouette in an old deputy's coat, face always turned toward the water. Locals called him the housekeeper. He never spoke, never waved. But sometimes, after his visits, missing items returned. A long-lost fishing pole, a forgotten photo album, a scarf knitted by a grandmother long gone. Walter saw him once and followed. The figure walked to the water's edge, stepped onto a dock no one had seen before, and vanished into the mist. On the ground was a single, soaking wet page from Carl's ledger. Memory, once kept, must be dusted. Section 35, The Unseen Room. In early spring, a visiting researcher from the university heard rumors of the lake's history and sought to investigate. He brought sonar equipment, drones, and a team of graduate students. They didn't find a house. What they found was a gap, an acoustic void, a place sound refused to echo. Beneath that void, the sonar died. The lake floor bent strangely, like a funnel turning downward forever. The researcher left the next morning. His notes were published 6 months later, but the final chapter was missing. In its place, a blank page and the words, "Some rooms are not for mapping." The spiral symbol followed. Section 36, The Ice. That winter, the lake froze over late and melted early. When it did freeze, the ice was strange. Not smooth, but rippled, as if it had captured a current mid-motion. Beneath the ice, townsfolk saw shadows, figures standing upright, unmoving, as if caught between surfaces. Walter drilled a hole near the shore, dropped a flashlight in. It vanished into blackness. The next morning, a perfect spiral had formed in the ice above the spot. Children stopped skating. Dogs refused to go near the shore. And Clara's old coffee pot turned on every day at 7:14 a.m., without being plugged in. The lake was still, but not silent. Section 37, The Bell. One morning in March, a bell rang through Stillwater. It came from the lake. A deep, echoing chime that no one could trace. It rang 3 times. After the final toll, those who'd been taken, Judith, Jack, Margaret, even Carl, were seen around town. Not in body, in glimpses, in reflections, in dreams. Walter stood at the dock and said, "They're not gone. They've just been rearranged." Agnes's ledger appeared on his porch that night. Open to a new page, freshly written. The house is full. The bell rings for opening. Walter lit a lantern and walked to the edge of the ice. By morning, both were gone. Section 38, The Archivist returns. Gerald Finch, the archivist from Duluth, returned to Stillwater after 15 years. He brought with him a suitcase full of spiral symbols, regional lore, and a worn recording from 1958, Carl Renner's voice describing the first 3 disappearances. Finch sat alone in the library, listening. As the tape played, the lights flickered. Then, silence. The recorder stopped, rewound itself, began again. But the second time, it was Judith's voice. Then Jack's. Then Agnes's. Finch's final notes simply read, "The house has achieved narrative density. It is now telling itself." He checked into the inn that night and never checked out. Section 39, A New Ledger. In spring, a child named Eloise found a book washed ashore. Its cover was warped, water-stained. But inside, the pages were crisp and blank. She took it home, told no one, and began to write in it dreams, names of people she didn't know, places no one had told her about. At first, her parents thought it imaginative, but the dreams came nightly, more detailed, more structured. She began drawing spiral patterns in the margins. When asked where she learned them, she said, "The house showed me." And on the final page, she wrote, "I am the new housekeeper." Section 40, Stillwater. By midsummer, Stillwater had changed. No new people came. No one left. Mail was delivered, but always from within. The radio only played local broadcasts. The diner still opened each morning, but the cook was never seen. People began referring to the memory fog, a dull haze that blanketed the lake and mines alike. Cabins that didn't exist last year were suddenly occupied. Names reappeared on gravestones. Dates shifted. No one questioned it anymore. And in the center of the lake, only visible when the fog broke at dawn, a roof could be seen, shingled, cedar, and dry. The house had surfaced. Section 41, the floating room. Late in July, a single room appeared adrift on the lake. Not a boat. A room, cedar-paneled, square, complete with a window and a small wooden desk. It floated silently, tethered to nothing, spinning slowly. No one saw it arrive. Walter's nephew paddled out to it. He swore he heard whispers coming from inside, but when he opened the door, the room was empty, save for a rocking chair and a steaming mug of tea. The next day, the room was gone. But that night, the boy began to draw floor plans in his sleep, intricate blueprints of rooms, staircases, trapdoors, always ending in spirals. Section 42, the library below. Eloise, the girl with the new ledger, began asking questions no child should. "Do we live on top of the stories?" she asked her teacher. "Is time just rooms you walk through?" She spent long hours by the lakeshore, whispering into the water. Once, she claimed the house had shown her its library, shelves of books that pulsed, breathed, and changed titles as you watched. She said some books were warm, others cold. Some refused to open. Eloise told her parents, "The house remembers everything, even the stories that didn't happen yet." And at night, from her bedroom window, she could see a flickering light beneath the lake. Section 43, the visit. On the anniversary of Carl Renner's disappearance, something new occurred. He came back. He walked out of the lake just before dawn, dry as bone, ledger in hand. His eyes were calm, his voice soft. "I've finished my shift," he said. He spent 1 hour in town, visited the diner, walked the main street, tipped his hat to Clara's empty window, then returned to the shore. As he stepped back into the lake, he handed a young boy his ledger. "Every house needs a record keeper," he said. By morning, he was gone. The ledger contained entries from the future. Section 44, the memory house. Stillwater no longer pretended. The lake's fog now hung all day. People walked its banks without speaking. The town had become an echo of itself, a library built of flesh and time. Those who listened carefully could hear staircases shifting beneath their feet, even on dry land. Others found doors where there hadn't been any. Doors that led to kitchens full of smells from long-dead grandmothers, or parlors echoing with music from forgotten dances. Stillwater had become more than a town. It had become a floor of the house, and the house was still growing. Section 45, the spiral sky. On the final day of August, the sky above Stillwater changed. Clouds twisted into spiral arms. The stars no longer aligned with maps. Some constellations whispered. Others blinked. Astronomers could not explain the distortion. But one, from an observatory far away, phoned Walter's old line, though he'd been gone for years. He left a message. "It's not just below anymore. The house is reaching up." That night, Eloise climbed to the attic and drew a final symbol in her ledger. A house, floating above a lake, with stars at its foundation. The page shimmered once, then went blank. Section 46, the Keeper's Walk. In early September, Eloise vanished for 3 days. Her parents searched everywhere, but there were no footprints, no signs of struggle. Only her ledger, left open on her pillow, pages now completely filled. On the morning of the 4th day, she returned. She walked from the fog, barefoot, silent, eyes wide but unafraid. In her hand, a brass key shaped like a spiral. She whispered to her mother, "It's unlocked now." And when asked what she meant, she said only, "The house wants to be known." That night, she began to walk the lake's edge with purpose, pausing by trees, cabins, forgotten wells, as if checking rooms no one else could see. Section 47, the town below. A drone flight from a curious outsider revealed something impossible. Beneath the lake's clear surface, an entire town had formed. Not ruins, not a reflection. A town full of cabins, streets, lampposts. Mirrors of Stillwater structures above, but subtly wrong. Older, or newer, or both. And among them stood the house, fully formed now. Chimneys smoking, windows lit. The footage was posted online, but within hours, it disappeared. Only a few downloaded copies remained, often corrupt, missing audio, or looping endlessly on a frame of Carl Renner at the door. The town above watched its own memory form below. Section 48, the invitation. Every household in Stillwater received an envelope. Inside was a slip of parchment, blank at first. But when held to the light, a spiral became visible. Beneath it, one phrase. You may enter. Some burned theirs. Others framed them. A few packed bags and walked toward the lake, never seen again. The rest simply waited. And as the days passed, doorways appeared in places no doors should be, in trees, on rocks, in mirrors and puddles. Each bore the spiral. The town was now full of entrances. And somewhere in the fog, the house waited with the door ajar. Section 49, the housekeeper's ledger. Eloise was seen writing less and watching more. She stood at the edge of the water each night, ledger clutched to her chest, as if waiting for someone to arrive or return. One morning, she walked into the diner, placed the ledger on the counter, and told no one in particular. It's finished. All the memories are shelved. Then she smiled, turned, and walked through the kitchen door. No one followed. No one saw her again. But the ledger remained. And each time someone opened it, a new page appeared. Section 50, the house above the lake. By year's end, the house no longer hid. It hovered above the lake now, just slightly, casting no shadow. A spiral of fog curled beneath it, anchoring it like roots. Its doors were open, always. Stillwater was silent, peaceful, complete. And in that peace was understanding. The house had not come to take, it had come to preserve. It kept what would be lost. It remembered what no one else could. It was not a threat, but a keeper. In time, the name Stillwater faded from maps. But to those who dream deeply, to those who listen in the quiet, the house is still there, waiting and remembering.